We are recording. Greetings, everybody. I'm Jason, the Hellenic Wolf, and I'm Helene. And today I have the immense pleasure to interview one of my newest heroes, I would say. And I love the word heroes. In Hellenic language, it's heroes. So I love this because it's tied to mythology, which mythology is one of my favorite things in life. And I'm saying this because since I was a young child, I was always into mythology. My first books, actually, were about Heracles, or how we say it, Heracles in Hellenic language. My guest today is related to all that, and I'm very, very pleased, very, very happy that he accepted my invitation and, granted me the honor to be here. So, Benjamin, welcome here.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's a great honor to be here. Very interesting. I love talking to people from other places and getting their perspective on the world. And then, honestly, when I first started, because I love mythology myself and been an avid mythology reader, and it's helped everything I work on even now for trying to figure out how the world works. And L.C. King and I are trying to figure out this biochemical cosmology and how the world really works. And all the old myths play into that. And the Greek myths were the first ones that I read. As a very young child, I was reading all the Greek myths and found them absolutely fascinating. So that was actually where I started. So this is really awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you bet. I didn't know that exactly. So we have that in common, right? So we both started with Hellenic mythology. Amazing. All right. First, before we dive into more detailed things, so give us a short synopsis of who you are. I can do that myself, but I think you are the best to do that.
You bet. That's no problem. My name is Benjamin Balderson, and I've had a pretty interesting life. I started out young. I'm from South Dakota, and a farm, and started out just your typical farm life. So I started having a family when I was young. I have 6 kids. I have 7 grandkids now. So I've been living off, the farm life, and ended up upgrading that to off-grid a number of years later, and just quit being on the grid and having anything to do with that. Also, a big component of my life, like I said, is that I studied the myths, and then that eventually evolved into the occult and alternative science, things like that. And I don't just read about those things. One of the things that ended up happening in my life was I ended up developing something called Wilson's disease. And this is a rare disease that makes it where your body has a hard time processing copper. And because of that, copper will end up building up in my brain, and I'll have a grand mal seizure, which is the really nasty seizures where you fall down and flop around for a while. So the medical industry was giving me Klonopin and Seroquel in order to try and curb the seizures. And these 2 things basically made me a zombie. I was walking around. I literally couldn't tie my shoes, leaning over too far. And I'm a very athletic, agile person. And I couldn't even lean over and tie my shoes. I ended up putting on like 100 pounds. It was pretty horrifying. And I just became non-functional. So I quit taking their drugs and started trying cannabis. And funny thing is then their drugs, I was still having a couple seizures a week. On cannabis, well, currently I haven't had a seizure in 3 years. But the raw plant in and of itself isn't enough to do it. It's not effective enough. So I was taking the plant and making an extract out of it. And I was going through these steps of making the medicine. And I had also, again, had been reading all these occult books, which obviously included alchemy. And I noticed that the things I was doing were matching up to the things that they were talking about in the alchemical procedures for spagyrics and things like that. Except for I was missing some components in there. There were some things I wasn't doing that the alchemists were. So I did those things and found out that I had amazing effect. It became super effective. So I just started practicing alchemy. And then, like I said, I also had avid interest in mythologies and religions. So I've studied all the different mythologies, all the different religions around the world. I've been to every ceremony that I've ever had availability to, no matter what it was. It doesn't matter whether it was Muslim, Jewish, Native American. I've been to all of them, participated, different pagan ones. I'm personally a heathen, which is actually one of the last things that I came to for whatever reason. And I noticed that a lot of other people from my area also really push that away. It's a very interesting thing. It must be a very programmed thing. But when I finally I picked up this, the Havamal is what it's called, and it's the words of Odin. And when I did that, it was like everything in there, the vast majority of it anyways, it was like this was already fully ingrained in me. This was already how I thought the world should be, how I should be living. It was like putting on an old glove. And from there, I started really, really getting into the myths, into the stories, into the histories, things like that. And, it was so rich and just glorious. And the stories were so interesting. And the way that they thought you should live life was so fantastic and so much in tune with what I want. And this is the people that I'm from. My people are very Germanic. So that I think that this way of life is the right way, is just, like I said, like an old glove, just bam. As opposed to most people who start studying these things, I really need to get in and live something if I'm going to understand it. Like I said, I didn't just read the books. Like every ceremony I've ever had availability to, I've been to. You know, if you don't walk a mile in somebody's shoes, you can't understand what they're talking about. Whether you agree or not, even after you've walked the mile, if you don't do that, you don't really know. And so I've tried to do that as much as possible. And with this, because I've fully taken on this, one of the big key components of being a heathen is being self-sufficient, being independent. This was already something, because I'm from a farm, that I'd already wanted to achieve. I'd already had lost interest in a lot of the things that the world had to offer. I had actually been a millionaire before and owned a number of businesses, and it was one of the most miserable times of my entire life. I owned a large restaurant and bar, and with all that money, so what? That during the 12 minutes every other week that I had free time, that just meant that you just spent that just like mad trying to fill the gap of that you just lost 2 weeks of your life trying to earn this crap. That it was absolutely miserable. I slept in the bar most of the times, because by the time the bar closes and you clean up, it's 3 a.m, 4 a.m. I lived half an hour away. Well, then turn around, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, I've got to be in there getting the grills on, so that way when the cooks show up, everything's ready for the cooks, and then they can actually make breakfast for the consumers. And it was just horrifying. And you try and hire people to do that, but it's not their business. They're not getting rich. And even if you give them good money, they don't care. It's not their business. They're there for a paycheck. And if they've got enough money in their pocket, half of them don't show up anyways. So again, that whole society, that hamster wheel, was just miserable. And at the end of the day, you're still subject to everybody else and all these other things. And I stepped back, and another key feature to the way I changed my life is cutting down expense. And that's one of the things that people have a really hard time with, is really just living as simply as possible. So when you look at life and say, in 6 months, if I'm not able to work for 6 months, how am I able to still be living? Then you've got to look at what you've got coming in and what it takes to keep you alive and keep you going. And at the end of the day, you need heat, something to protect you from the weather, some shelter, some heat, food, and water. So I very deliberately started plotting a life where no matter what, that was mine. I didn't have to rely on anybody else in order to provide those things. And right now, you can probably just lightly hear it. There's 2 streams that run, each of them about 30 feet on the side of my house, and my house is right in between two fresh mountain streams. One of them is the head of the spring is right here on my property. And so I pick up my drinking water, my house water, right out of this stream that's springing up out of the side of this mountain. Also, I'm surrounded by trees. I went and invested in a fantastic wood stove that also has a cook oven on the side of it. So the wood box is attached to an oven, and then the top has stovetop burners and everything. And it has a little flue in there that'll make the fire dance around that. So it can either just be your wood burner where you're just heating your house, or it'll push it all over into this cook area, and you can adjust that to adjust the heat of the cook area and things like that. So we always have fire to cook with, heat that provides light. Our house is always good to go. We get warm water from it. Now I do have a water heater, but if that becomes a problem, where propane becomes a problem, and that has been recently, like right now in the United States, not on big propane, but the smaller propane cans that people use for like the buddy heaters and things, you can't hardly find those. Nationwide shortage. There's signs in the windows, little signs in the aisles. Don't even ask. They aren't here. So with all these shortages, you're seeing these kind of things. Well, if propane becomes a bigger problem, I'm never going to actually have a problem. No, I won't be able to just turn on my shower, and my wife won't be able to just turn on the faucet and get hot water. We'll have to get it out of the kettle in the kitchen and take bird baths or whatever, and she'll have to do that, but we'll be just fine. Just a little less convenient, that's all, and that's okay. And then I got solar power with a couple generators for backup, and I'm getting ready to put in a small water turbine also for the backup. So that way, what little bit of power that we do use, we're always set to have that. Now, the final component that I have not put into place that I'm getting ready to, because I've already got all the equipment to extract plant oils, because I do that as an alchemist. Well, one of the things that you can do with these plant oils is turn them into biodiesel. So if my generators need diesel, and this is again a problem in the city, now I just need I'm getting the biodiesel plant. So now the oils out of any of the plants that I can run around in the forest and harvest, extract their oil, turn that oil into biodiesel, and now I can run my generators, drive to town if necessary, and all these things are provided on my property, which again, as a heathen, this is a huge deal, because being self-sufficient, as a heathen, you're not self-sufficient, you're a slave to somebody, flat and simple. What they want, your life is very dependent on. And even though you may not get beaten or shot as you think of when you think of the classic slave, the fact that you could lose your income, that you could lose your home, your car, all kinds of things that people set themselves up to lose. You're a slave to those people, because if you don't do what they want, you lose those things. And when you build your life around that, that's hard.
First of all, let me tell you that what a beautiful story that was that you just described of your life and how you set up your homestead. But it seems to me that basically, if you are not the master of your own fate, your own destiny, you are a slave. So basically, you can either be the master of yourself, or you can give the mastery of your own body, soul, or whatever you call it, your existence, to somebody else. And he holds the keys to your food, to your life. Now we see, for example, many people that used to find joy in bars or in clubs, in places like these, restaurants, and they now lost the ability to do so. And it always amazes me, because I never liked exactly that kind of enjoyment myself. But what I loved, and I still love, and it's free, is to go to a park with a friend, with a beer or with juice, and just sharing our news and enjoy our life in nature and simple things like that. And it seems to me that when people seek too much comfort and too many luxuries in life, they are astray of the freedom path. So they get astray. they lose touch with reality and they lose touch with also nature. So it seems to me that in a sense, all these measures and all these strict things that are going on right now are in a way good, if I can say so. It doesn't feel very good, but I think it can help people realize what is our own fate, how we can go to our own, how we can control in a way our own fate, our destiny, our lives, our food, everything. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, and I want to take this back to a little bit to the myths, because in my opinion, this is a fight that has been being fought since the beginning of human consciousness. The human understanding is the Promethean fight. When Prometheus gave the fire or human consciousness to man, that divine spark, and he became more than just a goyim. When Odin gave his higher mind to man, not all men and not all gods thought that was a good thing. Prometheus himself was punished for doing this. Since then, even in the world of man, back then, half of men thought, no, only the gods should have this decision-making ability, this higher thinking ability. We should basically be automatons, that the gods lay down the rules and we just automatically follow the rules like little robots. And now you see this today where the same thing's going on, where we've now, like you said, I love what you said right there, because I feel exactly the same, where people want to give up that authority, and because they're abusing it so horribly, this is the only thing that's going to break that the people are going to go, maybe I should not let other people make all my decisions, because that's leading down some really bad paths. And until we experience that, let's face it, every little kid touched the fire. None of them believed. Every single one of them touched. And until we touch the fire, we are not going to believe. We're going to assume that somebody can just do good for us. I was just on a show the other day, and we were even talking about food. And every food worker will not eat the food in the food place they work for. Whether it's a food factory, the chicken factory, the beef factory, whatever. Those people, half of them turn vegetarian because they won't even eat meat anymore. And then don't stop and think that the people in the vegetable factories don't eat that food either. Factory food is not good for you. It's horrifying. I'm part of the truther world and the conspiracy world, and I don't really take that as a conspiracy, because like myself, I've got milk cows, and I understand that when I milk my cows, I bring them up to the milk up to the house and put it immediately in the cold, and inside 5 days that milk it's a little tangy. It's better for buttermilk biscuits or something than it is for trying to actually use for something you want decent tasting milk for. Well, when you start looking at that in a commercial productive terms, as a consumer, that farm then has to take it to a commercial distribution plant where they bottle it, pack it, filter it, all those things. It has to then be taken out to the stores. Then it's going to sit on the store shelf for however many days. Before you buy it, you're going to take it home, and it's going to sit in your fridge for however many days before you even consume it. Well, this is not a viable plan. You can't complain that they've taken the life out of milk, but then also not want to live a life where that milk can possibly be alive. Because if you want to go buy it from a store off a shelf like that, it needs to be pasteurized. It needs to be, or else you're never going to have anything but chunky buttermilk. That's what you're going to get every time. So if you really want to be about what you're talking about, you got to start living a life that's in tune with that. And your food is one of the biggest parts of that. And people don't want to do that. It's only as they get sicker and sicker because they've let other people take care of this. Other people take all their responsibilities for them. And life gets worse and worse. And like you said, Now all the simple things that they've taken, that people took for granted, we're at 2 years now. We're over 2 years. Like, this isn't something that it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve and this and that, and just another extension. And it's years now. You have lost your life. You have lost your ability to go out and just buy a meal at a restaurant, or freely just go out and associate with your family, friends, just hang out in the public space. They've decided they own the public space and can tell you as a free human what to do and how to live. And now they've taken that even to the next step. And it's been told, everybody was screaming it in the truther world. We were all trying to tell you, now if you're not vaccinated, you don't get to do all these kind of things. You can't travel. And you as a free human cannot do all these God-given rights that you were just born with. Have been taken away by some people who just said, you've got to do what we do. And they don't even justify what you're doing. In the United States, the very first vaccine for the very first COVID, that trial doesn't end till 2023. So this is experimental at the very least until 2023, no matter how you cut it. And when requested, the FDA, when they got requested what they, why they're authorizing, forcing this vaccine, they have until 2055 is what they requested back. We want to let out a few pages a year until 2055. So you're not even getting the medical information until 2055, the full story, which is absolute insanity. And you're operating under experimental drug, and not even if they aren't even calling it experimental, full well knowing that the very first trial doesn't end until 2023, next year. And we're now on variants, boosters, everything's been changed, everything's been altered. All those alterations need to go through a clinical trial. And all those clinical trials take a given duration in order to pass the clinical trial. And you're not even allowed to talk about this in the open space. And they're making rules based on this. And then full well knowing that in the public space, there's something called Nuremberg codes, which were developed after World War II, where they did do supposedly really nasty things to people and did medical experimentation without their permission, without stating fully, we're going to do a medical experiment. Is that okay? They aren't doing that to any of these people that they're giving the vaccine to either. They've fully broken the Nuremberg codes, which were set in place specifically to stop this thing that is happening right now. So until we fully feel the pain of this, apparently until we've put our hand completely in the fire, go, oh God, this sucks, we won't pull it out. We won't quit touching the fire. And that applies for so many things, all the way up to giving your authority to other people. Until things get so bad that you decide, wow, just on the face of it, I can't accept that. Just off my own senses, that is absolutely unacceptable. And nothing you say, authority person, will change that. Until you get to that point, we're not going to revert and go, nah, that fire, it's ours. It was always meant to be ours. We were always supposed to have it. This is our free will. We're not meant to just follow like little automatons. That's absolutely foolish. And that fight, like I said, has been a fight throughout history, and it's a fight that's at its high point right now.
I want to ask you, Ben, because all that analysis is beautiful, and honestly, I'm in full agreement with it. But one thing I'm wondering over the past few months myself, and I'm not sure about this, so I'm just, I want your opinion too. So we're talking about all this stuff with a few friends here, trusted friends in Hellas, and we are of the same opinion like you, of the same, maybe I shouldn't say opinion, I should say stance in life. We've seen over the years, and not just the past 2 years, because Ben, and you know better than me also, especially in the US. Yes, the past 2 years were horrific, but it didn't just begin 2 years ago. That's going on for decades now. And you know very well about what I'm talking about. And some point, Ben, I'm wondering, are we all people meant to be free? Are we all people meant to really take the fate in our own hands? Or are mythologies just an ideal so that some of us at least hold the light, hold the light of freedom, and it is meant for only a few of us to really keep the light on, So what's your opinion about all that?
My opinion is that most of the world, and this brings us right back to the last point, was comfort's been the greatest weapon in the world. And because these people have led such a comfortable life, even the ones who are poor people today live better than most kings. They've got heat at their touch. They've got electricity at their touch. They've got indoor plumbing, clean water all the time. They've got food stamps. They're, even though it might be food they have to cook at home and they're not eating out, either did kings. There was no such thing as eating out. They ate home cooked food at home, but they had spices, and you can get spices like from everywhere. I can get the best spices from Greece in the grocery store down the road, right? Not for me, it's an hour down the road, but I can go to the grocery store and get the best spices from Greece at my fingertips. They live like kings. That comfort has made them weak, and that free will really is only made for those that will take the torch, that have the guts to stand up and do it. You don't deserve to have those decisions if you don't have the will to back up yourself, if you don't got the spine. It's very interesting because you hear a lot of liberals in the United States cry around about the Constitution and how it was written for landowners, and then they don't take into account the things of the time when that was written. And when the Constitution was written, if you wanted to be a landowner, how did you do that? Nobody owned the land here. You went and took it. You said, this here's my land. So you were doing a lot of things. You had to understand how to run a farm, how to build a farm, how to do animal husbandry, how to home care. And then if you had employees and things, you had to run an entire system. That was a lot of willpower, intelligence. You deserve to have free will. And they say, oh, only landowners got to vote. Well, if you didn't own land when land was free and all you had to do was have the gumption to go work it, you didn't deserve to vote. Why should you get a vote? It makes no sense. You don't have enough wherewithal and intelligence to live like the landowners. Why should you get a vote on how things get ran? That makes zero sense. Only the people capable of running it should get a decision on how it gets ran. That's the only way that makes any sense. And we've lost that system. And if you look, the United States, the founding fathers said they don't call it a democracy. They said they have created a republic if we are strong enough to keep it. And a republic is free men that act under a couple universal laws, like don't kill other people, like don't go over and steal from your neighbors. These are just a few universal laws. And other than that, be a free man. Make your own decisions. Do your due. If you die because you can't run your farm and you starve and you run your things into the ground, that's your deal. You're responsible. And one of the big deals since, like you said, 2008, is that we see that for these large corporations, their expenditures and their bills are socialized, where we all have to pay when they make mistakes, when they screw things up and they go and gamble and tried to make a whole bunch of money, which they wouldn't have shared. That wouldn't have been socialized. The profits are privatized. It's the bills that get socialized. So they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar and it didn't work out. And now everybody else has to pay the bill on that. And these corporations and these rich people, they don't have to do that. At the end of the day, if we all decided that we don't care about their money system, what power do they have? If we all decide that if we go back to homeowners, landowners in the United States, we call it homesteaders laws, where you own the land you work. You know, my house is here. I plow these here fields. My cow's in this field. This is my land. Now we've gotten to this other weird point where, again, we've given authority. The government owns half the land in the United States anyways. I'm going to assume the same applies for Greece. The government owns half of it or better. And then rich people just bought up large chunks of the rest of it. And you gave them the authority and power to do it. And you still give them the authority and power to do it, because that piece of paper they're holding that says something only says something because you let it say something. If I wrote on a piece of paper, I'm king of the world, nobody would respect that. Nobody would assume I'm king of the world. It's just as ridiculous for you to respect the pieces of paper they present you and say, well, we've decided this is a law that you need to wear a mask. And then not only have we decided that you need to wear a mask, we're not even really going to scientifically justify that or logically, but you're still going to do it because you're a freaking weak-spined clown.
Agreement, 100%, 150%. But so one thing I want to ask you though, Ben, is I had almost the same conversation with Pierre and other guys, my friends, and all these guys the past weekend. How can we claim our authority back and claim our rights, which are from God? It's not given by man. How can we do that peacefully? What's your opinion about that? How can people that live now in the cities, how can peacefully reject authoritarian rule, or maybe I would say perception of rule? How do you think? Because violence, I'm not a violent person. I personally abhor violence. I don't get into fights. I know that it's necessary. I've got myself into a couple of fights or more, but I don't really like to solve my problems that way. I don't like to punch people in the face. Some people deserve this, but whatever, deserve that. But I want peacefully. I want everybody to, have his own land, have his own food, make love, not war, all that great stuff.
Yeah.
How can anybody start? So, because you said you were a businessman, so you had fortitude, you had a spine, maybe you were born into hardship and you developed that spine when you were younger, maybe through hardship, through lack of resources, and you become resourceful, and then you became a businessman, and then you understood how that works, and then you started your own farm. But one layman may say, Benjamin, was born into hardship. It's easy for him to be self-sustainable, but I am a young man. I'm born into this kind of easy life into the city. I'm 30, 35, 40. And I don't know how to start. So what do I do, Benjamin?
Well, a lot of people, and this is I appreciate this question. It's an excellent question. So many people do want to go and just fight and attack. And I get that question so often of how do we get everybody up in arms? They don't state it exactly like that, but that's what they're asking. How do we get everybody up in arms so we can go overturn the system, have the revolution? In the United States, it's real popular, the bring out the guillotines, and everybody talks about the French Revolution and all this, blah, blah, blah. And my first thing when you're talking about that, not that I don't want this system to crash, but you never burn the field you're eating out of. That's absolutely foolishness. You don't burn the field you're eating out of. So if you don't like the system, and here's the other thing, when you're going, even these protesters, the people that go in front of these figures and ask them to change things or even demand it, that's just like a child that's living under their parents' rule, going up and stomping their feet because they want bedtime to be 10 o'clock and not 8 o'clock. That's all you are. That's all you're doing. You're still appealing to authority. You just want authority to act in the way that you want. You want your cake and to eat it too. So step one must include you becoming an independent, self-sufficient person. And if we want to not take part in this corporate paradigm, that means we need to not take part in the luxuries and in the things this corporate paradigm are offering. We need to build our own paradigm. You don't like pasteurized processed milk? Then go get your own cows. If you can't get your own cows, you go and make friends with people that do have cows, or you get together with other people that are interested in that, and you get a piece of land that the group of you can garden, keep your cows on, take turns milking the cows. There's options. If you want this, earn it. Go get it. I promise that my farm was not given to me. My last farm, this one I just bought, this one had a small house on it, but we built all the outbuildings on my last piece of land. There wasn't a stick of wood, trees, but there wasn't a stick of lumber and a piece of fence on that land. I did all of it with my own two hands. You want it, go earn it. That's a fact. That's part of that free will. That's part of earning that, being worthy of having that decision to stand up and say, I am a man. I can do what I want and say what I want. I'm responsible for it. I'm responsible for everything on this farm. As I said, with that free will and with that, I'm also taking responsibility for all the problems that happen here every day. You know, anybody that watches my show, you see technical difficulties pop up usually once a show. That was me running to deal with the internet or the power or an animal or whatever was going on. Because that's my all day, every day. I don't get to call somebody and say, oh, my power went out. What the hell? You need to fix it. This is so inconvenient for me. I don't get to do that. I have to deal with it all myself. But because of that, I don't feel that anybody gets to tell me how I get to live, because I take responsibility for it. That's step one. If you want it, go earn it. You don't get to be a baby and say, well, this is how I want it, but not go earn it. If you want a different paradigm, go earn that paradigm. So today you're in an apartment. Start growing microgreens out your window. Start putting away. Cancel all your stupid little Netflix subscriptions and all those things, and start putting that money, because I understand having to live in society until you can break free of it. I'm not saying you should just be able to today be self-sufficient and independent. But if that's what's truly important to you, make it happen. Start growing your own food. Start doing all the things you would need to do, and start prepping yourself. Put all your money into that and finding your enjoyment in that. Like, one of my things I enjoy doing is, especially in the winter, like right now, all of my tools that I went around all summer beating the shit out of, my chainsaws, my axes, my all that kind of thing, and I sit all winter. I service all my equipment. I sharpen every chain, get everything all nice and sparkly, perfect for next spring. And I actually enjoy that. It's a very calming, nice thing for me, and I'm proud when I touch that chainsaw tooth that was dull and it just bites into the tip of my finger, and you got to be careful so it doesn't cut you. You're like, yeah, that's good. And then next spring when I go to put that to wood, it's going to go like a hot knife through butter. It's just going to be wonderful, rather than sitting down and watching Netflix while at the same time paying for some app that I'm dicking with on the phone and blah, 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 and all those things that are going into it. Instead of going out to McDonald's, going and buying your food and preparing your food, buying your food in bulk, starting to go get bulk beans, things like that, and preparing them yourself instead of getting canned foods that are easy. You can just chuck in the stove and blah, blah. Start doing all the little things that life is going to entail. And before you know it, you're that guy. People one of the biggest comments I get, and I have a lot of visitors come to my home. We've done 2 events at my home so far where we had lots of random strangers. And the last one last summer, that went on for a couple months, where they helped me move. About 30 people came to the farm, helped me move, pack up everything, set up this farm. And one of the biggest comments I get is you live what you're talking about. And I do. Again, and that didn't start out. I had this dream years ago to be this. And I wasn't that guy. And all of a sudden, just one day, I am that. I'm the embodiment of that. When people think of that, they think of me. That's because I live this, and it's just been one piece at a time, every single day. And sometimes I live rough, and you have to learn to be okay with that. If you truly believe that the system's going to fall, how are you going to sit and make yourself dependent on how much luxury there is? Like, you look in the summers now when they talk about rolling blackouts. When people lose power, they're going to lose their air conditioning and they will die. You die without air conditioning? Holy shit, air conditioning's only been around for what, 80 years, 50 years, 100 years? I don't even know how long. And now we are so horribly dependent on it, we will die without it? That's insanity. You have done that to yourself. You have atrophied your human system to the point where it's that pathetic and weak. Well, build it back up. If you decide that you don't like the way your arms look, you don't like your puny little arms, you start eating a higher protein diet and lifting weights, and before you know it, 6 months from now, a year from now, your arms are bigger, and you want them to keep getting bigger, you keep doing it. That's the way life works.
Wow. That was, I'm going to clip that and I'm going to make a video of it so that you know. And that was a beautiful message, man. And I'm really taking that to heart because I'm in that specific spot right now. So I'm into taking the leap of faith to that kind of life slowly but surely, and trying to find some people to rent, some place, and to try to make my own tomatoes and all that stuff. So very encouraging to hear that from you. And it seems from me, from what you say, that everything that's great, everything that's really freedom oriented takes some time, and you have to be patient, probably, right?
Yep, absolutely. If you want it, you got to earn it. You can't earn things in a day. You can't.
Yes.
That is my favorite part of this apocalypse, pandemic, scandemic, whatever you want to call it, is that it has taken this society that we had become such a push button society where everybody thinks if you push a button, your whims should happen. And it's now taken that away, where now you actually don't have that everything at your fingertips all the time. And I love that about it, because that is such an insane thing that people think that they live this Star Trek life where they walk up to a little machine and boop, and whatever they want just pops out. That's insanity. That they don't have to earn things or wait for things, or, like even an easy example is instant pudding. It's so much worse. It tastes like it's garbage compared to the homemade pudding with the skin on top, and that's got just so much richer of a taste. And the skin, who doesn't love the pudding skin? But you can't even find, people don't even make that because everybody loves that instant, just zip, and it's there, and they can just start shoving it in their gullet. And I love that they lost that. I love it.
That makes 2 of us. And one little anecdote about that before we slowly closing. Here in Hellas, many people that we are descending from the mountains and from rural areas, like I am. So for example, my mom comes from a village in northern Greece that is very cold, a lot of snow, up in the mountains, a village in the middle of nowhere, in Epirus. And her life as a young child was very harsh. So she had to move weights. She has to bring the water from kilometers away. She had to feed the chickens. She had to do all that kind of stuff. And she had a close relationship with nature and death. So death was a constant in the village. Maybe animals, sometimes somebody was dying. And there were no doctors up there, all that great stuff. And my mom and my father the same. My father is from the south of Greece, but the same thing. From a rural area, rural farmers. My grandfather was a farmer, vineyards, olive oil, olive trees, all that stuff. And very poor.
Nice.
Exactly, yeah, beautifully nice. And by the way, all my grandparents lived up to their 90s, and that's weird if you think that they had no doctors up until they were 60 something. So that's another thing to talk about in another day. But my family, we don't like ready food. We don't like that kind of supermarket food. We are disgusted by it. I, as a young child, I learned to admire and to try to find out the best food. And when I say the best, something that my mother prepares. And I've been with some girlfriends in the past, and I've seen that not everybody's really into that philosophy. And I believe I'm making the connections that if your parents are not from villages, from somewhere that is rural, they don't get the education, the understanding of what is the proper nutritional food and what is the fake supermarket food. And I remember that the girlfriends that I had that had parents from rural areas, they were very into cooking and into preparing, home food and whatever I liked and everything. And the other ones, more, junk food, all that stuff, So that's something to ponder about.
Whatever you can dump in the pot, heat up. Dump it in the pot and heat it up. It's good. No, it's not. It's horrifying. That's not even food.
That's a conversation for another day, but it's a very important one, It's education. Who knows? Ben, I have to say I would love to talk with you for a few days more if I could do that, but I know that you're a busy man. And I want to respect you and your time. So I want to thank you first for coming up in my small Hellenic podcast and informing me and my beautiful Hellene friends about your doings, your philosophy. And I hope we can do a part 2 at some point in the future, not in the near necessarily, but in the far future about alchemy, because I'm very interested about that also. Until then, where can people find you, Ben?
It was an honor to be on, brother. I greatly appreciated it. It was fantastic talking to you, and we had an excellent conversation before the show. It was awesome. You're fantastic, brother. And anybody that's looking for me, I've got this last year I started my own show on Rockfin, so it's Benjamin Balderson's Odins Alchemy, and I have Benjamin Balderson on YouTube. YouTube, I just put a little bit on there because they're very sensory. They like to censor, so Rockfin does not. So that's where you're going to find me. And also, if you just look out like Crow, Freeman Fly, Marty Leeds, Matt Belair, I'm all over the place. I did a lot of that before I finally came to Rockfin and found a place where I can speak on my own and felt comfortable doing so. But you betcha. All over the place in the truther world.
Great to hear, man. You heard the man himself, so go find Ben in I will put the links down below, everybody, so find him everywhere. He's a fantastic man, and we just covered just only a few things here. If you watch his videos and his conversations, I mean, there is a thesaurus, if I can say the word correctly, which in Greek, in Hellenic is thesauros, so it's probably the same. Thesaurus of information and ideas. Yes.
Very nice.
And Ben, if you please stay for a moment after we close the recording. For anybody else, have a great time and see you in the next episode of the Hellenic Podcast. Ciao.